and I was very grateful, as because I had taken over the company when they landed in Kuwait. Like the first time I met my company commander was when he pretty much stepped off the bus with the
Yeah,
rest of the company.
yeah,
And, so it was good that we did have that spin up time in Kuwait to do some training, uh, get the last minute, you know, checks. And, we were still getting, I think, night vision, and then
mhm,
you get your theater equipment too,
mhm,
right? So there
mhm.
was other equipment that was being issued to you. But I remember when they said, "Hey, you guys are going to be going into the Diyala River Valley, the big city." There's Baqubah. I've never heard of it, not once. I was just like, "Oh, okay. Let's see what happens," yeah. So off we went.
Yeah, and then task organization, as we talked about earlier, that changed significantly. Again, we were basically a brigade-centric organization as an army fighting the insurgency at that point. So, because of this, the way the sectors were, our brigade was detached from the 1st Cavalry Division. We worked for the 25th Division, which was a light division, who had an airborne brigade from the 82nd. We gave up 3/8 Cav, which was a heavy maneuver brigade or battalion, 2 tank, 2 infantry, and so on. We gave them up to the 82nd, and they gave us a reconnaissance squadron in exchange, uh, which had actually just gone through a transformation from an infantry battalion to a reconnaissance squadron. So they were still kind of half 11 Bravos, half 19 Deltas, and they were great soldiers, great commander, and and so on and so forth. But
Who was the commander then?
Drew Pappas,
Drew
who
Puppets.
General Pappas these days.
Okay.
Very, very proud of him. In fact, he's one of the leaders of that unit I was talking about that went on to just do such great things in the army. It's just unbelievable. Uh, but but anyway, but the only issue is that they're half as big as the battalion you go up, and they don't have
Not a good return on investment,
no,
right?
and they don't have the rallies and tanks.
Right.
But a great, great outfit. We could talk some about what they did on our too, but anyway, so lots of flexibility. In fact, as I recall, we had, the two second battalion of the 82nd Field Artillery. We had 2 other gun tubes on war orders. We had 2 other gun tubes at the Diyala Media Center,
Yeah.
which I believe was in air sector. And we had 2 gun tubes with 3/8 Cav over in the 82nd's 3rd Brigade area. And I can't remember the name of their file, but so you talk about task organization, and that artillery battalion shot more rounds probably than anybody had up until that point in Iraq, and maybe even afterwards, because of the surge.
Yeah, I know we weren't bashful about calling them up.
No, no,
They weren't bashful about answering either,
no, they weren't.
especially when they came up with those. They towards the end, and we're kind of jumping ahead, but towards the end, we were getting some precision munitions. I forget what the term is.
Excalibur was it one
I think it
Excalibur?
was the
I think we
Excalibur,
fired the first one in combat.
and it was that was a welcome pull
Mhm.
for sure. So when we rolled into Baqubah, we ripped as a brigade. I think there was some turbulence when it came to how we thought we were going to be task organized versus how we were task organized
Mhm.
with, like you said, the PRT team and the MiTT teams, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So before we deployed, the brigades were issued a deputy commander. So we had a brigade commander and a DCO, and he was a lieutenant colonel, former battalion commander. And then, of course, we had the S3 and the XO, who were majors. So right before we deployed, because of this change of mission, if you will, and shift, we had to fill 3 different teams: the MIT team, the PIC team, and the BIT team. There, so the military transition team, the provincial reconstruction team, and the other team, I believe, worked for the State Department. I can't remember the acronym per se. So we lost our deputy commander to one of those teams, our S3 to one of those teams, and our XO to one of those teams. So the 3 senior officer assistants to the brigade commander are now gone. And the fire support officer becomes the XO, who's a great American, but that's the position he had to step into. And then what I kind of forgot to mention a minute ago, when we task organized this way with the units from other divisions and such, that we ended up basically, as I recall, with 2 infantry companies in the brigade. In a sector, as Colonel Sutherland used to describe it, as being as large as the state of Maryland. That's a hard analogy because the state of Maryland is kind of oddly shaped, but the square mile is the same. So in this whole sector, we had 2 infantry companies. So we put you both in Baqubah. And I kind of joke and say we put Alpha on the west side of the river and Bravo on the east side of the river and let you guys have at it. That's all we had.
You did.
Yeah. And again, not to jump ahead because we'll get to it, but after the surge, we had 16 combat outposts in Baqubah, not 2, 16. Wow.
Yeah.
But again, jumping ahead there, but that's the whole flexibility, the the adaptability. You can't say enough about troops doing that.
Was it a kinetic fight when you guys rolled in? I mean, what was the operational tempo from the unit that you relieved in place? You ripped with.
It was pretty heavy for them. But again, as I said, between the lines crossing of the insurgency going up and the troop force going down, I think it got stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
So when we got there, uh, it was not an easy environment. In fact, I described it basically, you couldn't go anywhere without getting shot at or blown up.
As I'm sitting here looking over your shoulder at the brigade casualties, I see First Sergeant Ricky McGinnis's name right there at the top.
First one. We weren't even in charge of the sector at that point. He was in 6-9 Cav as the Alpha Troop First Sergeant, working out of FOB Normandy near MiTT, and left seat, right seat ride with the previous unit, and he gets hit with an IED. I think he was in the PC's position of the Humvee because he was on the right seat part of the ride. And here we are as a brigade, just moving into sector in this new mission that we just received. And before we're even in charge of the sector, we've lost our first man. And every man or woman is important, but to lose the first sergeant.
Yeah.
And you might recall, I replaced him with a first sergeant, another E8 that we had. A month later, he got shot through both knees.
I do remember.
Yeah. A tough old ranger buddy of mine. Side note, so it's kind of funny. The colonel's policy, we would visit every soldier in the hospital or the morgue. And we did far too many times. Trips to Balad. Situation. But so I lost a first sergeant, then I lost another first sergeant. So then I took a senior E7 who wasn't promotable.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of a hiccup on the first deployment, but I count him as 5 senior non-commissioned officers who, when given a second chance, rose to the occasion. He did a great job. Last I knew, he'd been a first sergeant for like 5 years. I don't know if he ever made command sergeant major, but he deserved the opportunity, and he got it.
First, you get into country, your brigade headquarters command element, for the most part, gets disassembled. First of the 4 wins. Before we even assume, authority of that area, you lose a first sergeant. I mean, we're coming pretty quick, right?
They were. In fact, the previous unit had been working in and out of that building all the time, and they had not really fortified it very well. And one of our young lieutenants was shot.
Yeah, that was Bravo Company. That was Lieutenant Ebar, and that was one of those things that a couple weeks in, he got shot, and it just absolutely disrupted, like the next man up process, but we didn't have another lieutenant put into that position. So really that platoon wound up sitting out there at the government center for a lot longer than we wanted to, but it was a decision that we had made, like, hey, we have to fortify this area, we have to build it up, we have to harden this site because obviously the way the unit operated out of there previously versus the environment that we were then operating in wasn't the same.
It wasn't the same.
So
And I guess, met key considerations again, they felt no need to fortify the rooftop area, and those kind of things. And I believe he was on the steps going up to the roof or on the roof.
he was on the roof, yeah, and sniper
Was
hit
it a
him.
folder?
But yeah, so Lieutenant Ebar, he's going to come on, and but yeah, he specifically felt that he was given this folder to you know hold
Identify him as leader.
and identify him as leader when he got up to the rooftop from one of the Iraqi counterpart that was working there, and they took a shot, and um, fortunately, he lived to tell about it. But he is powerless in a scenario where we are already right out of the gates down platoon leader. So yeah. So you said Colonel Southern said that our area was about the size of
State of Maryland.
state of Maryland.
Yeah.
Okay. And we had two infantry companies. And so where was the rest of the brigade? So we had 112 was in and around Baqubah, and then we had a couple other elements.
Well, 6-9 Cav, which is an armored reconnaissance squadron, they would fog Normandy with kind of our northeastern sector. In fact, their sector went all the way to Iran, as a matter of fact. And then 573, which was the airborne reconnaissance squadron, they would fog Caldwell, which was south of Normandy, and their sector went all the way to the Iranian border also. And so it was very spread out. And then, of course, the 215th Sword Support Battalion, they operated out of Warhorse with us, but they were running convoy and logistics patrols, for all parts of that thing. And I was very proud of those soldiers. In fact, between train up and PCCs, PCIs, and everything, they had a pre-convoy scenario that they went through right there on Warhorse. They were meticulous in their S2, S3 updates, their vehicle inspections, their PCCs, PCIs, and they had to be. They were running all over the place. But I don't remember exactly when that police station was overran and burned down, but we took it over early December, right?
Yeah.
In fact, my Facebook page is my picture smoking a cigar in the IP station the morning after we reoccupied it.
Yeah, War Dog went down and reoccupied.
And then
when that police station got overrun, and I don't know if they killed all the Iraqi police and people in it, or they just melted into society. But they blew that building up, and Echo Company, our engineers, went down and resecured it. But an engineer platoon, they're not headquarters. And oh, by the way, they were getting ready for the route clearance mission, right? Because we were getting the Buffaloes and the Huskies, and they were having to do all that. So when Bravo Company had come in, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after we occupied. That's when they tried to overrun the compound again. That was we were in a patrol brief getting ready to go out there, and it was one of these rare instances where myself and the company commander was back in the rear, and he's doing a brief. I'm monitoring the radio traffic. And then Sergeant Malo came over the radio and said, "Hey, well," and we knew they were taking. We knew they were under attack because we were getting ready to go out there and be the QRF, but we had to get a Bradley out of maintenance, and it was like we're still building combat power. There's firefights going on. They took 77 mortar rounds in and around that top. And that was really for the folks that don't know that terrain. I think it was maybe 200 meters by 100 meters, maybe 150 meters, and to take that many indirect rounds, and to have the enemy that close, like they were throwing hand grenades. It was one of
You had those
those,
deserted buildings that weren't too far off,
yeah.
right there about the 2 o'clock position if you're looking like east.
The platoon that was out there was just throwing smackdown on them, and we had the tanks. The tanks were out in a blocking position supporting another operation in Tahrir, but we were getting ready to go black on, we were running low on 7.62. So that's when they made the decision to bring the tanks back section by section to unload from some 7.62. And they were, Barter was up on top of his tank, uh, passing down ammo, and that mortar round came in and landed right on top of the tank. And when I was, like I said, I was sitting there monitoring traffic, and I remember Sergeant Malo coming over and talking about they had a KIA, and I remember pulling out my battle roster, because he called up, on his battle roster. I just ran my finger down it, and I went over and interrupted the company commander. I say, sir, we got a KIA. And, we went out there. Of course, that's when Sergeant Major Harris and his
Yeah,
PSD.
yeah.
They talk about marching to the sound of the guns. He was out doing battlefield circulation, and he's listening to the same radio traffic. And I want to say he got hit, machine gun fire, IED. I think his
on his way to them.
I want to say Sergeant Major Harris's vehicle.
He had like 4 flat tires, I think.
He had 5 flat tires because this
flat.
the spare was flat too. And
he's a great American, one of my heroes.
Yeah, and they wound up coming into the compound, and as soon as they disembarked their vehicles, another mortar round immediately lands, impacts, and wounds at least one of his guys.
I think it was his driver.
Yeah, right. It was and then we were finally able to get that other Bradley out there, and things subsided. But yeah, that was just a day and many days like that. That was a pretty high adventure day for sure. What about like the morale piece? Like casualties are starting to mount, killed in action, wounded in action, vehicles are getting destroyed left and right. Like this is really starting to become a knife fight downtown, and we're killing insurgents. From my recollection, between indirect fire, the wolf pack, the aviation assets, all of these things that you know like sure we're taking casualties, but we're giving it back to them tenfold. What was the conversations that you were having with leadership? Um, you know, inside the brigade and outside the brigade, like, hey man, I'm not sure if the troop surge was on the radar yet, because for a while there, it just from again the brigade was responsible for uh, a place the size of Maryland, right? And it was a tough fight, right? So what were those conversations that you guys were having?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. I tell you, once young company commander who had lost a number of soldiers, and he was bearing that leadership responsibility pretty hard. And I had a conversation with him, and I said, "Well, think about Eisenhower's responsibility. And Eisenhower led the invasion of France and Europe on D-Day. Thousands of men died on the first day of the operation at at a place on the battlefield where his orders put them.
Yeah.
Right? I said Eisenhower could not, let that defeat him. It was his job to lead that mission. he went on, to become the president of the United States. But as a leader, you do have to understand this is what we're doing. We are in the United States Army. Our job is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. As an infantryman, our job is to close with and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver or repel his assault by fire, close combat, or counterattack. That's why we get a combat infantry badge. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our brothers and sisters who are not in the infantry, but that's our job.
What you said earlier was, Desert Storm kind of, I think it set those expectations of a lot of people, to include current leaders in the military, right? Like, and you start taking casualties, and your mindset isn't in that mode.
No,
So,
but I again having been older and been in the Army for a number of years before I deployed to this location, growing up in the Cold War, that was our mindset. The mindset was this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be hard. If a soldier comes into the Army, after September 11th and deploys in an insurgency, their mindset's a little different. So I guess part of the thing is, and we coach, counsel, and mentor subordinates. We have to try to get them in the mindset so that they understand that this is challenging. And again, we were talking about it on a break there, but you do battlefield circulation and you go out to see a combat outpost in the middle of nowhere, run by a sergeant first class and his lieutenant. I did that with 2 troops. I took pictures with them that day. That one was in a machine gun position over watching the front gate. I used to be a machine gunner, so I know about the machine gun. I went up to visit him, talk about things, make sure things are on point. And then a lot of times I'd leave that position and I'd have to find that sergeant first class and say, look, the gun's not clean, the ammo's not, position where he could reload quickly. He doesn't have his nods, or I would try to make those corrections. I didn't. I tried not to chew the individual soldier because there's a leader responsible for that. I tried to build trust and confidence in the soldier by coaching him along things. Range cards, for example, is kind of a lost art. But then like 2 days later, an IED killed both of those men. And it's makes you wonder, makes you think. But again, and you talked about morale across the board. And as I said, Colonel Sutherland said, we're going to visit every soldier, whether it's in the hospital or the morgue. And we did that. One time, we had to go to Balad 8 times in 7 days. And we're sitting there at 4 o'clock in the morning waiting on a helicopter to bring us back. Because it was too long and too dangerous of a drive to drive there, so we'd fly. And he had a meeting with the provincial governor at 8 o'clock. And I said, sir, I understand what you wanted to do when we deployed over here, but we never thought it would be this heavy. And we've been there 8 times in 7 days. I said, if you need to take a break from doing this sometimes, I can continue it on our behalf. He said, no, sir, I made it restarted. We will quit. We will not quit. We will continue going through. I said, yes, sir. But I mean, so even, I've tried to even consider his morale. We're talking about Chaplain Fenton, our brigade chaplain. Chaplain Fenton had served at Arlington, and he conducted 2,500 funerals at Arlington, 9 of which for people he knew, one of which was his driver. So we get there, and we're having these casualties, and he went with the colonel and I every time, and he would visit the soldier in the morgue and lay hands on the body and say a prayer. And one day I leave my chew and I'm walking up to the headquarters, and you remember our big memorial wall, all those tea barriers.
Yeah.
And the most names in the middle from Greywolf. And he's standing there with his shoulder stooped, looking at the name right in the middle. He says, I didn't know that my former driver, Will, was killed here.
Yeah.
And in it, as you know, it ultimately wore very, very heavy on him. And he ended up as a stress casualty, if you will, and being evacuated from theater.
Yeah, that's not only are you taking on, your own personal, but, the brigade, the battalion, chaplains, they took on everyone's, when it comes to the casualties and not just casualties, man. It's just talking to the soldiers and trying to keep the machine going, right? So, yeah, they definitely are high risk for sure.
Well, if I mention a couple of incidences with casualties, if you don't mind, because 573, they went on an aerial reconnaissance of an area,
Yeah.
and they saw something look kind of funny in a sand dune. It turned out it was an open door to a cache. Uh, so they landed. This is the battalion commander and his staff, basically. As many men as you put on a Blackhawk, like 10 or 12. They secured the perimeter because they realized they found the cache. They sent the bird back to get more men. They notified everybody back there to come out. And this is in a village called Turkey.
Yeah.
And it was the day before Thanksgiving, if I recall, very early in the deployment, 3 weeks in now or so. And they developed this fight. And they had 2 platoon leaders killed in gunfights in that fight. Uh, and they went back and did Turkey Bowl too, because we call it Turkey Bowl, because the Office of NCO football game on the day before Thanksgiving, the Turkey Bowl. And this was in a village called Turkey, and so we called it Turkey Bowl 2. We went back in and did more. 6-9 Cav was involved in that one with heavy blocking positions while they air assaulted into their positions to do the sweep through the sector. But, that was early in the thing. Again, the fight built up. Platoon leaders in gunfights, basically in a mountain environment, and in fact, some of these were in canals because they were using these canals almost like alleyways, caches, and maneuver avenues, And then 573 also had a platoon in an outpost in the north central sector that a car bomb tried to get through the gate one day. And their Sergeant First Class, Saban, he went running across the fob to warn everybody, and when the car bomb blew up, it killed him while he was trying to save other lives. A couple weeks later, they came back. Since the car bomb didn't answer the call, he filled a dump truck with explosives.
Yeah.
They didn't even try to get through the gate. They just blew up outside, and the whole building collapsed. 9 men were killed in that instance.
Was there a duel? Was it back to back? Like one dump truck blew up and then they were doing casualty evac and a second vehicle came in?
I'm sorry, I can't really recall.
I just know that was an absolute tragedy.
Yeah.
In Iraq hits close to home. 9 soldiers are dead and 20 wounded after a suicide car bombing northeast of Baghdad. An insurgent group that includes Al-Qaeda claims responsibility for the attack on the internet. Now, WRL's Holly Harris is live at Fort Bragg with the latest this morning. Holly, it's got to be a sad day at Bragg.
It absolutely is. I spoke with a major here, and he said he described this as a dark time for everyone. Several families will be affected by this. As we've said all morning, 9 paratroopers dead, 20 wounded when a suicide car bomber attacked a patrol base in the Diyala Province that is northeast of Baghdad. The paratroopers are members of the Task Force Lighting Group who fly under the 25th Command in Iraq. This is the single largest loss of life since 5 years of deployment in Iraq for anyone, for the soldiers here at Fort Bragg. So again, when I spoke to Major Tom Earnhardt earlier this morning, he said that the entire post here is grieving over this, but he's very confident that they are going to rally together, support these families. Right now, they are continuing to notify everyone involved. They say they're not willing to release the names at this point, possibly later on this afternoon. But again, he said these are very strong, close-knit group of people and that they are going to make it through this. But he said already in the last 24 hours, some tears have been shed here at the post. Back to you.
All right. Holly Harris live at Fort Bragg. Thank you, Holly.
And then 6-9, we lost a helicopter in the breadbasket. That's what we call that area, the breadbasket, which was north of their fob. And so we sent in a platoon to recover the 2 men in the helicopter. And 6 more men were killed in a Bradley on the way to retrieve those 2 helicopters. So that phrase, leave no man behind, You know, that part of our warrior ethos, our soldier's creed, that's a heavy price. It's a heavy price to pay. There's 6 men in a Bradley to retrieve 2 men who have already been killed. But that's the way we do it. You know, that was so significant. General Petraeus came to our memorial service for that. You know, and those 6 men's name, I can remember the chaplain calling the roll or talking about those. He didn't call the roll. He called the names of those men. You know, uh, during that.
So what's going through Don Felt, Sergeant Major Don Felt's mind at this point? Like the troop surge hasn't even happened up to this point, right? Like we're taking some pretty significant casualties. What's going on in your mind?
Just gotta do what you gotta do. You're the brigade sergeant major. You gotta keep a stiff upper lip. You gotta enforce discipline. Try to raise morale. You know, you gotta be all you can be. And
Who are you talking to? Who are you? You know, and I think that's one of the things. Like with I've heard some future leaders. And hey, you don't have to be a combat leader. It's like sometimes it's lonely at the top, man. Like who were you having these heart to hearts with?
Colonel Sutherland, you know, we would begin. He actually began his day a little earlier than I did, probably because I ended mine a little later, I suppose. But we'd end up or start off with a cup of coffee, and you know, Colonel Kane is the XO. He was a very supportive fellow. He ended up building us a little porch, and he had these 2 rocking chairs made for us. And Colonel Sutherland and I both smoked cigars, and we'd have coffee out there, and we'd talk about the day. And then most of the time, we'd end the night virtually the same way, and we'd talk about the day, and then tomorrow, and kind of bounce things off each other, and so on and so forth. So you know, as you know from being the first sergeant for the company commander, the same as this, you know, with the colonel and the sergeant major, they're a buddy team, they're a battle team, and so we found a bunch of stuff there. But also different staff officers, you know, and you know, like your sergeant major, Dale Harris. You know, Dale Harris and I probably talked a lot about these things. And I believe a lot of it weighed heavy on his mind too, because it was his unit taking, you know, the brunt of the main effort on there. And Dale and I would talk quite a bit, and I really relied on his counsel quite a bit from to give me feedback from what it was like, you know, for in 112. And you know, you just kind of, and again, I would talk to Chaplain Fenton. You know, just kind of do those things. Uh,
It's kind of a balancing act, right? Like you have to keep the war machine going, right? But at the same time, you have to have compassion.
Yeah.
You have to have those moments with your peers, and Rodney Harris, Sergeant Major Rodney Harris, man, what a great patriot, right?
Oh yeah, great American. You know, so we had been there. I thought maybe this was about February time frame. They started talking about extending and surging and sending more brigades. And the brigades that had just left are going to have to refit quicker and come back. And you know, that was another morale thing because I almost am glad there were rumors of the extension because it at least gave people a little time to prep their minds, soften the blow a little bit, yeah, so that they could say, okay, well, we kind of knew this was coming. And of course, it did come and it was announced it would be extended, which is why I spent 2 birthdays there on that rotation. And, you know, and then we had other units come into our sector. Some of them were working directly for us, and some of them were just occupying part of our battle space, if you will. And that, I remember one unit coming in, and they said, "We've been moving around Iraq doing this and doing that, and we're going to show the cab how it's done."
I don't think anybody could really understand the magnitude of the fight they were getting ready to step into.
They weren't.
And I actually had one of those soldiers come up to me and apologize. He said, "Hey, man, they worked with another unit, mechanized, and they didn't have a very good experience. So I think that was their impression. Like, hey, man, here we go. We're gonna have to. Not only are we getting extended, but we're gonna have to go up and go into an area where there's a cab unit up." and
Again, we trained well, we were disciplined, and I couldn't be more proud of the way our unit executed. And I would hope our soldiers, they can say, they don't have to say, I deployed. They can say, I went to war with Greywolf. Because we did. Like you said, 77 mortar rounds in an area, not too much bigger than my lot right here.
Yeah.
That's almost like being on Omaha Beach. And I've told people too, I said, very proud of my troops. They didn't land at Omaha Beach, but it's like they land at Utah Beach every day. The casualty difference between Utah and Omaha was significantly different.
Yeah.
About 300 versus 3,000. Okay. Not that Utah was so easy, but we did have a much better air support plan for Utah Beach, which is one reason the German defenders were not as capable as they were at Omaha. But going through Omaha once is terrible. Going to Utah 365 plus days, because every day that you go out to the fob and the ramp drops and you run out and you go to do whatever you're going to do, you have no idea what's going to happen next. That works on a person's, inner resolve. Yeah. So I'm very proud of what our soldiers did and how they stood up to do it. And
for the surge units that had come in, they certainly the insurgents got their attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they recalibrated. But I'll tell you, when the rest of the operations, when we got task organized with them, I think 520 was task organized to Greywolf first.
I think then their brigade came in, right?
And then their brigade came in, and then they took ACO and BCO and attached them to 520. So, that was still with all those troops. It's incredible the amount of real estate and just really Alpha Company infantry, Bravo Company infantry. Then you had Charlie and Delta, which were tank companies, with a platoon of infantry per. How much it finally wound up taking to secure that area. Do you recall the combat forces?
I couldn't quote you totally the numbers, but when we first got there, we had 2 combat outposts, Alpha and Bravos. And by the time of the end of the surge, we had 16 combat outposts. And it took weeks to clear by sector, dealing with those deep buried IEDs and everything else. Buildings that explode, killed 3 of our men at one time, kicking the door of the building explodes. So clearing it as a determined military operation. When that was finally cleared, that's when the things changed. 16 outposts. The enemy did not have free reign anymore because, as I said, we moved in there under strength. They were the mission at hand, especially as the mission evolved over time.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Did that actually turn out to be like an insurgent training area? I heard some rumors of that. Like, hey, this was, and I know Zakawi had called Baqubah and Diyala Province
the Caliphate,
the new capital of Islam, right?
Yeah.
So that probably had some significance as well.
It was like a magnet to draw them in, I believe. I don't know specifically when they were training there or not. They would have been smart to, because they were definitely going to get some experience doing it. But early on, you guys were finding bodies in places and, just terrible things. Men that had been, executed while being zip tied, all that stuff.
Do you remember the time where all those decapitated heads were lined up outside the village?
Yeah, wasn't there like 27 of them or something like that? Yeah, I mean, those are the things, and that occurred only in our deployment.
Right.
But again, those are the kind of things that start to change the mentality of the soldier to realize that this shit's for real.
Yeah, the hearts and minds and handing out beanie babies.
Yeah,
And
that was over.
that was over. Time to throw out the lead.
First, the Iraqi army and Iraqi police couldn't even hold a police station. They couldn't hold a checkpoint without getting run off.
Right.
So I said, okay, I can run a school, but I really at that point I couldn't afford to take soldiers out of your organization. So my PSD went through the course like 5 times. You 4 guys are going today, and you 4 guys will go next time.
I mean, they're our ticket out of there, right?
Exactly, yeah. And if they can't even hold a checkpoint or a police station,
Right.
so we focused on defense. And I developed this course, with my guys, and we developed this course, and I put them through we whitewashed that building. We filled sandbags. We paid Iraqis to fill sandbags. So we had to make it what right looks like. One of my proudest days was when Sergeant Major Mellinger came to the White Star graduation exercise and see the course. And we had a Marine gunny sergeant was there, and he said, "You just proved their training." So I mean, that was my way of doing things. It's not every brigade sergeant major is going to do that kind of stuff, but you got to do what you got to do. Like you said, there are ticket out of here.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a point where I know myself, we were asking for the Iraqi armies to come and work with us because we didn't have enough people for all the different tasks that we had to include the outposts, right? Like we're out, Bravo Company was down in Barrett's inside the IP station, and between owning real estate and the bad guys' land, and then also have to go out and do patrols, but also trying to sustain a force. That was a tough road to hoe. And Iraqis, they were certainly a asset, to bring in there.
Right.
The troop surge coming in and getting some Iraqi forces as well. I think we had to dig pretty hard to get them in sector. I think they came in from up north where the Kurds were.
Yeah.
And and I agree. I think the troop surge absolutely worked. That clear hold build strategy, getting out there, nesting with the people, but trying to win hearts and minds when the conditions weren't. I mean, it was very painful to hear that mantra of we have to win the hearts and minds. It's like we can't even secure the sector to do that. And it was pretty tough.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that. And so I'm glad to have this opportunity to do a debrief so that we can get the message out there to some folks, because they really need to understand what America's sons and daughters have done. Especially in my opinion, especially in our sector, but we weren't totally unique in that. Of course, it was great soldiers doing things in other sectors, but it really is a testament to the 1%ers. That raise the right hand and say, "I'll do that."
It is.
Here I am. Send me. And so I really applaud their wherewithal for that, and I really thank them for.
On the home front, the extension, right? The 15-month plus or minus a couple week deployment. On the home front with the rear D at brigade level, what were some of the challenges back there?
Well, first you have an extension, but an extension for a unit that's having such casualties.
Yeah.
That's even more complicated. That magnifies it tenfold probably. Because if you happen to be a Camp Arif John in Kuwait, you get extended for 3 months. That's not that big a deal. But if you're in Baqubah, probably the most dangerous place in the world at the moment, you're suffering these casualties, and then you get extended for 3 more months. That makes it significantly harder.
It was but it was no secret, right? Like it was all over the news. It was in the papers. It was pretty wide known that there was a fight over there.
Oh yeah, and our troops, their families, God bless them for supporting them, and I know in some cases that always didn't work out the best way, and it's very challenging for the spouse left back home, which is why I'm very thankful for my quintessential perfect Army wife. She's always very supportive of that, very understanding of that. And that does make a soldier's job easier. You don't have to worry about what's going on back at home.
Yeah.
So any of our troops today that are even suffering repercussions of that, or relationship issues because of things like that, I would have asked them to talk to somebody, do a debrief with you, talk about these things, get them off the chest, and find that battle buddy that they can relate to, and share those things with, because no man's an island. So.
Yeah, the redeployment piece, right? It was one of those things where, um, I can't help but ask the question to myself: Did we win? Um, what are your thoughts?
We won. As a nation, we probably didn't win.
Yeah.
And I talked to you earlier a little bit about the debacle of the pullout of Afghanistan probably helped soldiers understand what their Vietnamese veterans, Vietnam veterans went through, because the pullout of Saigon, from the rooftops of the embassy in a helicopter is a terrible image, and the same was the same as the pullout of Afghanistan. When we left, we had won. And what I would ask future leaders is, when you do this, when you send our troops, send them with a clear purpose, be behind them, be up front with them,
Yeah.
be supportive, be there for them when they come back, and follow through. I don't think we followed through appropriately. That's why I say maybe as a nation we didn't win. We didn't win Vietnam the same way. The soldiers won.
You win the battles.
You win the battles, right? So, and that's the tough thing about insurgencies. They take a long time.
And
To
redeploying now for the second time back to Fort Hood after a very, very hard fight, right? Um, I don't recall. Unfortunately, I left to go to my next duty assignment, which was a pretty tough pill to swallow too. I didn't know it at the time, but when you leave that support network and you get put on essentially an island, of people that
don't understand.
They don't understand, right? And I know that happened to a lot of people, right? So when you came back, the deck gets reshuffled. You start to reintegrate back into society, right? Or reintegrate back into a garrison environment, right? What were some of your challenges reintegrate back in? How many years, and also how many years did you do after that before you retired?
Well, we came back in 07. I retired in 13. So I got to do 6 more years. So I came back, and if you recall, General Phil was the commanding general of the 1st Cav, and Sergeant Major John Grove was the sergeant major. They both left for future assignments, and General Vince Brooks was put in place to command the division, and I was selected to be sergeant major. Well, General Brooks didn't stay in that position. He ended up to go on and do great and glorious things. But General Bolger came in. So I served as the interim division sergeant major until July, where I went to the garrison. So I served as the Florida Garrison Sergeant Major for 2 years.
Okay.
Which, in fact, halfway through is when the shooting in November of 2009. So I was the Garrison Sergeant Major when Hassan killed 13 people at the SRP site.
Wow.
And I had the distinct honor of calling the roll during that memorial service, which was a significant event. It was nationally televised, and President Obama attended.
Yeah.
And I had to call the roll for 13 people that had been killed on our installation
Right.
technically by a U.S. soldier, but a terrorist at heart. So that was another challenge, But again, I felt that being in the Army was my purpose. It was my calling. It's what I was meant to do. And when they changed the rule and said I could stay longer than 55, I stayed as long as I could.
Yeah.
So I stayed a little bit longer, And but also, you think you try to, go to a position of increased responsibility and so on, so that you can do more for more people. And at the garrison, I was trying to do more for the entire installation. And then I went to one more job after that. The Installation Management Command is the ones that oversees the garrisons. And I went to the West Region position in San Antonio. So my last duty position was actually at Fort Sam, although I did retire in Cooper Field. But they afforded me the opportunity to do that. But I can tell people I rode a horse in my retirement ceremony. Oh.
Yeah. So, the 22 a day.
Yeah.
If somebody's out there struggling, you as a senior non-commissioned officer of the brigade, you've seen your fair share of tragedy. What piece of advice would you give to any one of our veterans out there, current or future veterans that what allowed you to be successful in your life after the Army?
Well, it's probably a pretty complex thing. I'd say faith and family, two very essential parts of that. Sense of purpose, the fact that you're still in the game. You want to be in the game one way or the other. I still work for the Army.
Yeah.
I would say, advice, I'd say, first of all, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Sums it up very close.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is nobody's alone. You might feel alone, but please reach out to somebody, talk to somebody. If there's things bothering you, you gotta deal with it. And some of it's very heavy. I understand that some soldiers went through some significant emotional events with their experiences.
Yeah.
And then they come back to maybe a family that's not that supportive, or a situation that's not that stable. And I would ask them to reach out and find that sense of purpose and find that reason, and talk to somebody, because they have done so much for the country that one's too many.
One's too many. I like what you said. We don't fight alone. And that's actually I just came back from a retreat called the Mighty Oaks Foundation up in Ohio, and that's their mantra: never fight alone.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that we're still in it together. 17 years, 18 years, we're still in the fight.
And one thing I would say is, this band of brothers concept between military personnel, it's strong. Like I said, I first met you when you assigned to the brigade as an E7 promotable working in the 3 shop, and then I recognized your skills and you moved into a first sergeant position, which you did an absolutely fantastic job in a very difficult situation. You came back and you wrote a book and you held a reunion. I visited Daytona Beach one time, knew you were here. We linked up, I think, out at the pier, like lunch. We moved here. And in fact, I moved here. I could tell whoever's listening, I drove my 26-foot U-Haul truck, and I still had another one I had to go get. And I had it downtown, and I wasn't real secure feeling about where the truck was parked. And I said, "Hey, Bobby, I really hate to ask you to do this, but could you take this truck and put it at your house, or put it somewhere where I know it's safe?" And you said, "Yeah, I'll do that." And I said, "Well, I'm going to fly. I can't even be here when you come." It's okay. Don't worry about it. Then, oh yeah, by the way, it's like almost out of gas. You got to put gas in it too. And you came and linked up with my wife and kids and did those things and made that happen. And that's what battle buddies do for each other. Two guys working, in some mill somewhere, they probably wouldn't do that stuff for each other. But soldiers and sailors and airmen and marine, they do that for each other.
Yeah.
So when you don't fight alone, you depend upon this brotherhood, this bond that we have, and talk to somebody. Because I know you've got somebody that you have that bond with. Everybody does.
Right.
You know.
All right, leaders and politicians. That next upcoming sergeant major or brigade commander. What piece of advice you give them?
Man, if I had to sum it up in one little phrase, I'd say lead by example.
Lead by example.
If you're not willing to do what needs to be done, then stop doing it and move out somewhere else. I got a quick story about that if I could, and you could edit it out later if it don't work.
Yeah.
But when I was in 7th grade, I was taking air classes every Saturday at the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And our instructor was this big old man named Mr. Kilmer. And he used to tell us every Saturday, there's 2,000 kids in this class in this giant Carnegie Hall auditorium. And he would say, look to see, to remember, to enjoy. And I had missed a Saturday because I had to go get glasses. My vision wasn't good enough. I had to get glasses. I came back the next Saturday. I'm standing in line with, like 1,000 boys on this side and 1,000 girls on this side. And back then they sat us every other one, boy and girl, because we wouldn't talk to each other in the 60s doing that stuff. And he walked by and he stops and he says, when did you start wearing glasses? I said, Tuesday. This week, sir. And he's probably the first person that I ever saw who walk the walk and talk the talk, set the example, and lived what he preached.
Yeah.
And it sticks with me to this day, almost 60 years later. And he lived what he preached. So if you're going to be a leader, you're going to do these things. Do it because you have a sense of purpose.
Right.
Do it because it's your life mission. Do it wholeheartedly, and lead by example.
Politicians.
Lead by example.
Lead by example.
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward, There's, in my thoughts is just if we're going to send the soldiers to do a hard job, give them the right tools.
Yeah, give them the tools, give them the support. That's what I talked about earlier. Be upfront with them, be faithful to them, give them all the support they need, and do it for the right reasons. Politics is a whole other issue these days. There's, so many different aspects of it going on. But I would ask people, what I wish people would remember, okay? John F. Kennedy's speech when he said, ask not what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. If more people thought that today, we would care less about all these little special interest groups and all these little things that really, at the end of the day, don't make America. These things make America, not these other small things. We can fight over them, we can talk about them. We have to be able to come to the table and figure it out.
That's right.
But at the end of the day,
doesn't do anybody any good just to dig in and not communicate. If there's no communication, there'll be never a solution.
Yeah.
All right, last thing. You said you and Angie just celebrated your 40th
40th anniversary.
All right, so there's got to be to that married couple out there. What's your secret to success? 40 years is no small
It's not.
improvement.
It's not. I heard somebody ask this question and the person responded, never quit. And so that's probably helpful. If you don't quit, you're still married. So, and I remember actually the battalion commander of my basic training organization, he said, never, never, never. I remember it to this day. And that's the thing, if you're in it and you don't quit.
You gotta be in it to win it.
Yeah, exactly. And we say you better for worse. And when you get to be my age, that's not necessarily the easiest part for a spouse, you know what I'm saying? So, but I'd say too, again, it's almost like the suicide thing with we all go through rough times, we all go through difficult patches. Marriages do the same thing. But, again, if it's a temporary situation, don't give it a permanent solution.
That's right.
Figure it out, work through it. So,
well, I think that's a wrap. I think this completes your debrief.
well, I very much appreciate your time and your energies. Thank you for doing this for troops.
Yeah.
I hope it works half as good as you hope it will, because I know it's going to go through the roof. And, at the end of the day, if we reach out and touch somebody, then that's really what it's kind of all about. I thank you for putting all this together.
Right on.
Well,
Thanks, Tommy.
Well,
That's a wrap.